And we're back. Welcome to 2025. We have an all new episode of News You Can Use, a podcast by PA Stands Up about Pennsylvania, people, power, and politics. I'm your host, Edwin. I go by he, they pronouns, and I'm Director of Narrative Strategy here at PA Stands Up.
And I'm Hannah. My pronouns are she, they, and I'm the digital organizer here at PA Stands Up.
Together, we'll fill you in on the political moment and share what's bringing us hope. And later, we'll hear from our special guests, Taylor and Eliza.
In today's interview with Taylor and Eliza, we'll talk about Black History Month, their experience as Black organizers in a predominantly white area, the thinly veiled attacks on Black and Brown people, aka DEI, and how we can all work together to create genuinely inclusive organizing spaces that prioritize diversity and marginalized voices.
So I'm just going to give y'all a quick recap of what's going on, so please stick with us. If you've been paying attention to any news outlet, you know that Donald Trump is playing dictator again. This time with even more billionaire besties using the commas in their bank accounts as measuring sticks. The fascist game plan alludes to flooding the zone, which translates to shock and awe campaigns. Trump has signed over 200 executive orders, which are unconstitutional and most likely will get tied up in the courts. His main focus is attempting to force through legislation that hurts all of us, unless you're a billionaire. We know that his ultimate goal, of course, is to make us feel so overwhelmed, distracted, and fearful that we freeze instead of fight. Trump and his cronies want to make us comply early, but we know better. We will not obey in advance. We will not surrender a battle that hasn't even been fought.
And this brings us to what's bringing us hope. No matter what happens, it's all going to take time. The ACLU has ongoing lawsuits against the Supreme Court's decision on presidential immunity. Since January 20th, they filed lawsuits against the president to protect people for the human rights abuses he proposes, specifically suing to protect detainees at Guantanamo Bay, protect our trans neighbors, stop the coup that he's throwing against democracy, and labor unions are suing to protect federal workers. Here in Pennsylvania, Governor Shapiro sued the Trump administration over the federal funding freeze to protect Pennsylvanians. We support Governor Shapiro's decision to protect us instead of billionaires. The federal funding that's currently inaccessible is owed to our neighbors and communities, and as of the 25th, that funding is accessible again. The Trump administration was trying to hold our resources hostage, and luckily, Governor Shapiro put working people first. We're grounding in the fact that hope is an act of resistance. If hope pushes you to really seek out or create community, that's an act of resistance. If hope gives you the drive to start doing something, like joining PA Stands Up or a local chapter, that's an act of resistance. If hope helps you take solace in the fact that your participation is one small but necessary part of building the bigger we, that is resistance. Together, we will get through this, but it's up to all of us to do our part.
Rest is also an act of resistance. We still need to take care of ourselves. Not to be too much like touch grass, but go touch grass, y'all. We can't be effective without decompressing and taking care of our needs. Here's a great way to start. Answer the question, what fills your cup? For me, it's taking my dog Riley for long walks, going to yoga with my best friend. I've also made it a habit to keep the breaking news to a minimum. I like to get the gist of things and keep it moving. I opt in for bullet point news recaps instead of long think pieces. We don't need to worry about every possible potential outcome. It's important to stay in tune with your capacity and rest when you're able to. We're only able to give time and energy to the good fight if we're taking care of ourselves first.
Exactly. And we are thrilled to welcome our two special guests today, Eliza Booth and Taylor Enterline. Welcome to the News You Can Use podcast. Can you share a little bit about yourselves and how you got involved with PA Stands Up? We'll start with Eliza.
Sure. First, thanks so much for inviting me to be here. I love this podcast, and not just saying that because I work here, but I just really enjoy it. So thanks for inviting me. My name is Eliza Booth. I use she, her pronouns. I'm from Lancaster, and I am the Director of People and Culture here at PA Stands Up. However, I have been involved with Pennsylvania Stands Up since the very beginning. Before there was a Pennsylvania Stands Up, there was Lancaster Stands Up, and I'm really proud that I'm one of the people that helped found Lancaster Stands Up. And yeah, and I was one of the first staff organizers that we had in when we decided to have staff in 2017. So really, really proud to have that as my history here. And yeah, and I'm just excited to be here. So as far as like how I got involved, I've been here since the beginning. And I really started organizing because I wanted something better for this community. I felt like our country, our government was broken, wasn't working for the people, wasn't working for me or my family. And I was like, I have to do something. I have to use my voice. So that's how I got involved.
I guess I will introduce myself now. Eliza's an OG, so thank you, Eliza, for being here. And Hannah and Edwin, thank you for having us. So my name's Taylor Enterline. I use she, her pronouns. I'm from Lancaster County. I'm the local organizer for the Lancaster chapter of Pennsylvania Stands Up. I got involved in Lancaster Stands Up back in 2018. I was about 17, 18 years old when I was a senior in high school. I was just really in search of like some political guidance in a place where I didn't feel so isolated. Growing up where I did and like seeing the things on the news, going through the first Trump presidency, and I was like, I want to do something. I feel like I can say something, but this is not really the space where I can like engage in those conversations. And my beautiful librarian at the time at my high school, support your local libraries and your librarians, pointed me in the direction of Lancaster Stands Up. And this is where I had found my mentors, such as our OG Eliza, who has been in my life since then. And they really had a hand in growing me into the activist and organizer that I am now, and got to watch me become the person I am. So luckily for me, when I like took a step from activist work and organizing, and I was like ready to back involved, I knew where my political home was, and I was very much welcomed with open arms. So I've been on staff now for the past like 5 months, and it's been a great honor. So thank y'all for having me.
Thank you both for being here. I'm super excited to dig into these questions with y'all and just like, y'all some my favorite people. So I'm like, this is going to be a good pod. So thank you again for being here. Um, so just a quick grounding for us. Earlier, Hannah alluded to the DEI attacks, and I just want to like dig into that a little bit more. So as you know, we're coming towards the end of Black History Month, and I've been thinking a lot about our like movement ancestors, and I want to ask y'all: is there a specific quote or person overall that makes you feel inspired, like to be organizers and to dig into the work? And let's see, we started with Eliza first, but like Taylor, let's start with you this time.
Yeah, so a quote that I've actually been recently like repeating to myself is by our great poet and writer, James Baldwin. I can't be a pessimist because I am alive. To be a pessimist means that you have agreed that human life is an academic matter. So I'm forced to be an optimist. I'm forced to believe that we can survive whatever we must survive. Especially right now because it is in a state of surviving. This fascist government that we're experiencing is nothing new to Black people. Um, and it's just on a higher level. And so I've been really grounding myself in that to just like be an optimist, to like know that we are going to get through this, has really like given me hope. But when it comes to like the work and being on the ground, I'm very much inspired by our Black women who've always been on the front line of social movements. Particularly for me has been Angela Davis, who is a movement ancestor who is still here today, who we can still learn from, who you can still educate yourself on her story, her writings. One of my first like political and like social books that I've read were by her. And then my family bought me a whole array of books because that's who they knew. But yeah, Angela Davis, very much so.
Thank you, Taylor. How about you, Eliza?
Yeah. So Fannie Lou Hamer is I think, fairly well-known
Mhm.
civil rights activist. And the reason I thought of her, because there's lots of people that I draw inspiration from, that I think about, but is because she was older when she got involved in the civil rights movement. I mean, she was, I think, in her late 30s, early 40s. And she was also really tied to the church. She grew up in church. And obviously, we know, like, as Black people, like, you know, a lot of times our stories are started in church, and we're grounded in church growing up. And that was my experience. And so she would often speak about like God, and like just like how her faith like informed the civil rights work she was doing and why she was in the fight. And one of the things that she said, though, that I found really true, because a lot of people are like, you can just pray and everything's going to be okay. And she said, you can pray until you faint, but unless you get up and try to do something, God is not going to put it in your lap. And to me, I was like, right, exactly. Like, because we hear this a lot, like, oh, thoughts and prayers and just pray. And it's like, no, that's not going to get it done. Right. We are here on this earth for a reason, whatever you think that reason is, like, or who put you here. And it's our responsibility as good citizens of, you know, of this country, of the earth, to like stand up, fight for justice, you know, when we see injustice. And um, yeah, and so she's always inspired me. If you don't know about her, if you're listening to this and don't know about her, like, Google her. Her
Mhm.
story is really inspiring. She went through so much in rural Mississippi, fighting, you know, just trying to register people to vote. She was she was beat up. She was shot at. I mean, everything like was done to her, and she just kept going. She's like, "You're not going to stop me," and to me, that's really, really important for me to hold on to that.
100%, especially during these times. It's like,
Yeah.
whatever you're going to throw at us, we're just going to keep it moving because we've been here before and we're not going to stop making sure that we have liberation for everybody, not just billionaires. Hannah, you can ask the next question.
Thank you both so much for your thoughtful answers, and thanks for that grounding, Edwin. As Edwin said, we're coming to the end of Black History Month. So I want to know, what does Black History Month mean to you, especially in this current political environment where we have corporations and politicians eliminating DEI initiatives in what we know is an attempt at veiled racism? Eliza, let's start with you.
Yeah. I think Black History Month is just a chance to like highlight our stories, Black people's stories, to get people to just know the basics about Black history, since it's not taught in our schools. And so it's always like been important to me, because, yeah, like I said, it's not taught in our schools and people don't know much. And so this is just like a small attempt by our government to like, you know, educate people. But for me, Black History Month has always been taught all year round. Like, it's something that when my husband and I, when we had our son, we were very thoughtful and committed to making sure that we educate him, from, as you know, when he was little, on Black history, and so that he would learn things that he would never ever get taught in school. And honestly, by doing that over the years and sharing with him, you know, people, activists, inventors, you know, just all the different people that have made this country really strong and made this country what it is today. Um, Sharing that with him has educated me. And I've learned so much through that, and I'm, better off for it. So I don't know if that answers the question fully, but like, to me, that's like what it means. It's like, this is our chance to highlight and put forth, our people and like what we've done.
That totally answers the question. Thank you so much, Eliza. And it's also a reminder about how important parents are in this movement, in shaping the generations who will continue doing this work. What about you, Taylor? What does Black History Month represent to you?
Yeah, and I love that you made a point about parents, right? Because Eliza, as you were speaking, I'm sitting here like, "Ah, I wish I had that. For me, I really had to like seek out Black history and like learn who my people were, and know Black joy and Black excellence outside of Black struggle, which usually is the highlight of what we know our history to be outside of slavery and Jim Crow and beyond just the folks who continue to advance us and also the communities and how they looked out for each other and how they took care of each other. So for me, Black History Month is about Black excellence and Black joy and being unapologetically Black, y'all. Because we are seeing right now in so many times of like trying to fit Black people into boxes and like I keep going back to like the Super Bowl halftime show of Samuel L. Jackson where he's like too loud, too ghetto. And you have to like, conform into what society wants you to be. And so it's like now, not gonna curse, but bleep that. Because to be yourself, to be who you are, to hold your weight of your ancestors and also like the pressures of this world and still find joy. That, like as y'all were saying earlier, like that's resistance. Because so many times we see like that trying to be stopped and blocked, and really when it comes down to is the DEI initiatives and all those things. It's, we've always been here. We built this country. We're going to continue to be here. We're going to continue to be our joyful selves. A lot of us either had people teach us our history or we had to like go out and find that shit on our own. And I know I was one of them. And so continuing just to continue to learn, like there's always something to be learned from those who lived before us. And, even our history just in the past, like 5 years, like history was made back in 2020 by young Black activists, like know their names too, right? And so I think about that um, and Black futures. So that's really what it means to me.
I love that. Thank you so much for those thoughtful responses and a reminder that Black history is American history, and that while that includes the struggles, that also includes all of the joy along the way. Let's pass it over to Edwin for the next question.
Yeah, I'm like 100%. I love everything that y'all said, because even for me growing up in like a Black family, it's like colorism and other like isms play so much of a role in like suppressing what you're trying to like learn yourselves. So it's just like, yeah, sometimes you do have to go out there and find it for yourself. And gentle reminder, like if we're able to do that, like y'all are able, who are listening, you're able to do that too. Like don't just ask your Black friends like what I should be doing to learn from about Black history. We all have supercomputers in the palm of our hands. These smartphones are very smart. You can Google it, babes. It's not that difficult. Um, but I digress. I'll keep us moving. I know for me personally, as like Black organizer, as a queer organizer, there's been lots of different challenges, and I don't want to get too bogged into challenges, but I want to give our listeners an insight of like what's going on and like how we're moving through the work right now. So I'm just like, if you could just, without going too much into detail, share what you feel like you're sharing. What are some common challenges that you've encountered when organizing in predominantly white spaces? And how have you addressed them? And I'll let y'all take it over. Taylor, let's start with you. I'll give my 2 cents after.
Yeah. I think like going back to my previous answer in terms of like trying to like push us into boxes and conform, right? I've faced many challenges. I think as a person who has inhabited a lot of white spaces growing up, I found a little more challenging when trying to organize in predominantly white spaces. Because so many times we're trying to get folks to decenter their whiteness, so that we can like fight for a larger thing, right? Because we live in a white supremacist country. Um, and so many times, in order to continue to do this work and be in allyship, we need to get our white folks to do some internal work, and that causes some discomfort, right? And I'm not saying that's easy, right? As someone who grew up in whiteness, I have to check my own whiteness and how that has implemented on me. So, but I find myself sometimes doing extra labor, um, extra emotional labor, sometimes when it comes to tears or emotions. And I sometimes find myself comforting, um, when realistically, that's not my job. That is not my job, right? We're supposed to like move forward together. And so we have to like sometimes face our own whiteness and our own privilege a lot. And so that can be really difficult in those spaces. I know in addressing them sometimes I've had challenges. Like I said, I've been like on staff and like doing like predominantly organizing work for the past 5 months. I did a lot of activist work before, but now in this role of trying to build like power, it's been hard for me to address. So I'm still learning. And luckily for me, I have two beautiful Black queens and kings here, Eliza and Edwin, who I can lean on and have mentorship. But I also rely on my white organizers to do this work with me. So make sure that you have like a good base, because it's going to continuously coming up. It's whiteness is in everything. It's ingrained. It's, we live in a white supremacist country. And so in doing that, we have to unpack a lot of whiteness in our spaces. And so that can be really challenging. And I don't think a lot of the folks who come to us and who are in our spaces, right, like they want to be there for a reason. And so I really recognize that. And so sometimes unintentional harm can be done. And that doesn't mean like it's like necessarily being outright, you're a racist. No, it's never that. But microaggressions can pop up that maybe folks don't recognize. And sometimes it can be, hard to like confront that and seem like, well, now I don't want to be confrontational and getting into also how does I, as a Black woman, operate this talking to someone. And those continuously will go through because it's so ingrained. But I think I have to also believe that the people who want to work with us are willing to put in that work. And I've also seen that too. So.
Thank you, Taylor. I just want to uplift something that you said, that it's also not just falling back on like the Black organizers to do this work, but also the white organizers to disrupt whiteness in different spaces and disrupt those white microaggressions. Um, because yeah, this emotional labor, it gets tiring, and no one wants to be burnt out just trying to do your damn job. So let's go over to Eliza. Same question for you. What are some common challenges that you've encountered while organizing in predominantly white spaces, and how do you personally address them?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a whole lot to add for what I mean. Taylor really, I think, are very like laid that out very clearly, and I think as Black organizers, like I think everybody can relate to like what she said. I know I can. Like my first thought of when I saw this question was like, yeah, constant microaggressions against us, and it's by liberals, right? Like people who would consider themselves liberals, people who consider themselves not racist, whatever. But it is absolutely little things that at first, when that would be happening to me in these spaces, I would almost, I don't know, gaslight myself, being like, wait, like, am I just being really sensitive? But then coming to understand that no, actually, this is wrong. Somebody handing me their trash at an event, when I am, one of the organizers or there to present, and going up just to introduce myself and then handing me their trash. I'm going to throw it out. Like, what? So it's, there's these things that happen that we have to address. How to address that? If it's appropriate, if you're in that space and you're able to confront it at that time or say something about that, then do it in a way that, you can make that person kind of just holding a mirror up to them and being like, this is what you just did. This just happened. But I think in a way that is hopefully educational, but allows them to understand what they're doing. And if not, then confronting it, talking to them at another time, which I did with the person that did that to me. And it was a really, eye-opening conversation for them. And that was important. So it's like confronting those things when we see them, which in the past I didn't necessarily do, right? Because I didn't want people to feel bad and want and again, actually going back to something Taylor said about being a comforter, somebody who comforts people, that's like, it reminded me of a quote, and I had to look it up because I didn't want to get it wrong, but in 2016, Jesse Williams gave a speech at the BET Awards. He was getting an award for like his activism, and he gave, if you've never heard it, guys, go Google Jesse Williams BET Award speech. He says as part of his speech, the burden of the brutalized is not to comfort the bystander. And it struck me, and it's something that constantly has stayed with me. That's not our job. Right. And so, yeah, it's, you should listen to the whole speech, but when Taylor was talking, that was something that immediately came to mind. So yeah, I think, we need to confront this, with people that are doing this and not just like sweep it under the rug, not just, let it go because we don't want to make people uncomfortable. That stuff's got to stop.
100%. And I also think that like being in these type of spaces, especially movement spaces, interrupting whiteness and disrupting this shit, I'm investing in you as a person because I care about you, and I am the person that will take a moment to be like, hey, I just want to unpack what you just did, whereas some other folks out in the street won't be as receptive, let's say, because I've also been in some situations where I've had microaggressions, and I'm thinking about one particular, we were meeting with another organization within our ecosystem, and the person walked in and like walked smooth past me and went to one of my white staffers and was just like, hey, we're so excited to be working with you guys, and are you the director? And she was like, actually, no, that's my boss. And that was, and just having a moment of like, ooh, but I didn't even have to say anything. It was just my staffer was the person that was just like, that was kind of messed up, and like, I just wanted to acknowledge that like was super awkward. So I just want people to think before they act and take an assessment of the room instead of just going with your gut, whatever this is going to be, because that could have, detrimental effects to our movement in general. So for the white folks listening, just take a moment before you act. Don't touch my hair. Don't assume that everyone's reacting. It's like, don't touch my hair. Don't assume that I'm not in a position of power just because of the color of my skin. You never know who is in the room. So just be cognizant of your surroundings and just be intentional, be mindful before you actually do things. And I'll pass it to Hannah for the next question.
Thank you all for sharing your experiences and so many important reminders, because as white folks, it's up to us to support each other and hold each other accountable in decentering whiteness and educating ourselves and learning from Black history. We have to disrupt whiteness ourselves. It's not up to our Black comrades to educate us, to comfort us, or caretake us in our journey in decentering whiteness. And reminder that being a genuine ally is a lifelong journey of doing the internal work. It's going to be hard. It's going to be uncomfortable. And we're going to make mistakes. I'm going to make mistakes. But it's up to us to do it anyway. So on that note, can y'all share some strategies that have been effective in fostering genuine inclusivity and diversity within these movement spaces? Eliza, let's start with you.
Yeah, I think, one of the things that I've learned in organizing, and I've learned so much about people, about how to talk to people, just people's nature and stuff that they do by getting into this space. I've not been an organizer my whole life. I've, worked in the business world, whatever, before this. And so one of the things that I learned early on was asking people questions, specifically when you do a one-on-one and learning how to do an effective one-on-one. It was something that really helped me to know what questions to ask people so that we can dig deeper into what maybe some of their biases or why they do the things they do, why they say the things they do. Because a lot of times, we just go through life and not really thinking through why we think things or do things, but we are growing up in in a country, but in a world that has a view or a lens. Everything is viewed through like whiteness and white supremacy. And so those are things that when we get into these spaces, we have the opportunity to like ask questions. We have the opportunity to like dig a little deeper with folks, which is what's really missing. I think in general, like we are all very like separated. I think people, in this society. And so to have like the opportunity to get, to know people, but also to like get them to question and think about things that they've, maybe they need to unlearn, that they need to see differently. So, I think that asking questions, and hard questions, and then sitting in uncomfortability, and allowing people to sit in uncomfortability, is really important, I think, to foster like these genuine conversations and diversity in the space, and getting people to see the things that they need to change within themselves.
Definitely. Let's be uncomfortable together. That's literally how we move forward, and how we liberate each other. Taylor, what about you?
Yeah, let's get uncomfortable. Um, yeah, in terms of strategies, I think going just building off of kind of our questions and answers is also being in community with your white organizers, being intentional about our space. Read the room, who is in your space, right? And when we have issue cuts, who are we thinking about? I love that you brought up one-on-ones, Eliza. I just had a great one-on-one with a Black organizer here in Lancaster, John Mina. I'm going to shout him out because he is pushing to get the Black voter, up, and really just centers on Black folks, and challenged me a little bit in terms of like, hey, we have this really great housing issue cut that we're working on here in Lancaster. And it was, so do you know how many Black people are experiencing homelessness in your area? And I had to also challenge myself about like, holy cow, I don't know the answer to that. And we proceeded to have this whole long conversation, right? And then I also had a conversation the other day with one of our other orgs who are in our ecosystem. I'll shout them out. The Lancaster County Chooses Love, and still talking about our housing issue cut here, fighting for more protections for our unhoused. And they were like, we have a high trans youth population who are experiencing homelessness. So when we are talking about our issue cuts or what we are fighting for, who are we thinking of? And also then the people on our base, when we're having conversations, like who are they centering? And also for myself, I need to, as I've said here before, I grew up in a white house. I didn't say this, but I grew up in a white household. I've inhabited white spaces my whole life. So it wasn't until I really had to just regurgitate a lot of things that I've learned about Black people, right? To know myself and who I was. That's another James Baldwin quote, just dropping that in there. But then to do this work is to center Blackness, center Black womanhood, center Black LGBTQ folks, trans people, and so I think in doing not just who's in your space, right? I'm not just talking about sexuality or gender or even race. I'm talking about the way that our framework is working. Is our framework inclusive? Is our framework diverse? Are we actually, when we are fighting, what we're fighting for, is that for all of us, right? And if not, who is it for? And if it's not for all of us, then it's primarily white people because that is the default, right? And so even in me, right, I have to also have those, I was like, shit, check me because I need to, as even, a Black organizer and being inhabiting in the spaces I am, I was like, my framework is not as expansive as I thought it was, right? And so I'm grateful for having those conversations to make sure that, hey, if I'm fighting for these folks, who are they, right? And if I'm fighting for them and everyone else, I need to make sure I'm in conversation with them. I need to make sure I'm in community with them, so that we can do this work together. So I think that would be my strategy is really know who you're in community with and challenge your framework and check who is when you're fighting for something, who, be really intentional about that.
Oof, mic drop. I love that so much. And it was just, there are so many gems that were just laid out in front of everybody. This is a great conversation. Thank y'all. I'm going to keep us trucking because this next question kind of alludes a little bit to what we were just looking into, but let's dig a little bit deeper. So specifically thinking about our ecosystem and all the things that are going on right now, how can organizers ensure that marginalized voices are not only heard, but are also at the forefront of decision-making processes? Eliza, you've been with us for a while, so I know you've seen lots of different iterations of this organization. So how are we able to make sure that marginalized voices at the forefront of everything that we do?
Yeah, I'm just going to be real frank, right? Our organization has not been really good at this. And that's not for not wanting to be or not naming that we want marginalized voices. We want BIPOC folks in front and making decisions. But I think one of the things that, I think specifically in the last, couple of years, and more so now, is have a commitment. We are making a commitment within this organization to being very intentional about building relationships and staying away from, tokenism, staying away from a transactional relationship, which is let's just be honest, in the past, it's been that, or it's felt very much like that. And so for us, and I see us as an organization actively making those changes internally and then also externally. And we're working on ourselves internally with our, white staff, our BIPOC staff. We are working together and being very intentional about how we want to bring the people that we say we want to organize into this organization. And so that makes me feel really excited. Because in the past it was you say stuff, but there was there wasn't a lot of work happening to make that happen. And so now it feels really, it feels different. So I'm excited about that. But I think to answer the question is, for me, it's relationship building. It's not just, asking somebody to show up or, do this thing or speak. It's actually not asking, people to show it. We need to go where where our folks are, the people that we want to organize, where are they, and go to support, right? Just befriend, listen to people. And then through that, right, that I think through relationship building and doing that kind of work, things then come about naturally, and people are, oh, that's actually a place for me. I feel comfortable there, and because I know these people and I also know like what we're trying to do, I also think we need to do a better job at articulating what it is that our theory of change and also who we want to organize. I think we need to do that better. But as far as ensuring people, marginalized persons are at the forefront of our decision making, is we just like have to do it. I don't know how else to say other than like being intentional about it and being like, this is what we're going to do, and using that viewpoint, or like every decision, all the thing, like anything that we do has that viewpoint out front.
100%. And I'm like, yeah, I'm totally here for it. Yeah, sometimes we need to take the mirror to ourselves and be like, are we actually living your values, and are we actually doing the things that we're saying we are? And I think this is the first time that I'm seeing us as an organization moving towards that direction. And it just makes me super happy and proud to be part of this. And so, Taylor, you started touching upon this earlier, but I'm wondering, in your opinion, how can we make sure that we're centering marginalized voices and making sure that they are not just heard, but at the forefront of everything that we're doing?
Yeah, feel like I'm just going to be echoing Eliza here, but just in terms of like making sure it's not transactional, right? And going back into, I think, Edwin, as you were saying, holding a mirror up to ourselves, right? I think one thing I do love about our organization, we just had a really beautiful retreat when we were all in community together. We talk about this, right? Because in some of the experiences in the last 2 months for our Black organizers and our BIPOC folks who are on the ground, it's been a little tough, right? And so, being able to bring that to the conversation and be also, when we're reading the room, looking at our spaces, why don't people feel comfortable to be here? What space are we cultivating? That also makes it more of a comfort for other folks to be in this work with us. And we enjoy and don't take that a certain way because we need everyone in this fucking, oh, sorry, in this work with us. I'm sometimes a sailor, y'all. I apologize. I'm doing my best. But we need everyone to do this work with us, right? And so to do that, as we are asking other folks and individually, we also have to do that, get uncomfortable as an organization and be like, what aren't we doing? And making sure, as Eliza said, and I want to be very clear, intentional, like intentional. You need to be upfront about why you're doing this and not just because we want black and brown bodies in the room. That's not what it's about, y'all. Like sometimes I think we get caught up in numbers. Like, no, it's like in terms of thought and also the issues and the framework and really community. Because if you looked at our base, you would think, where is everyone? Right? Because our community, we want our base to reflect that and the work that we do to reflect that. So if that's what we're going to do and those are our values, we need to have deeper conversations and intentional about why isn't this a space for people and what work do we need to do? And is that not just entering other spaces, but building relationships, hearing people out and allowing yourself to get uncomfortable, be even as an organizer, right? Be challenged and be like, hey, might not be, okay, I hear you. I understand that. What else can we do? Or also, what am I missing? We need to really have those conversations. So I think just echoing Eliza, building relationships and being intentional, and not being transactional. It's because Black people are not a monolith. We have a lot to, we are all different folks. And also we are more than just like numbers to the metrics. And so we want to be very clear about that as we're talking about this as well.
I literally want to get that on a t-shirt. Black people are not a monolith, and we are not just here for your checks boxes. That's one of my biggest pet peeves sometimes when they're like, the Black vote or Black people in general are doing this. It's like, did you ask anybody? Um, which is another thing that I'm thinking of right now. Nothing about us without us. don't start making decisions about the people that you're trying to serve, because you, as an organizer, you're serving your community. So if you're not actually going out into the community and listening to people in the street or wherever people are and meeting people where they are, how are you going to build the bigger we? It's not possible to do that. And I'll kick it over to Hannah for the next question.
The best way to start this is repeating again, Black people are not a monolith. And I know we've touched on allyship earlier in this conversation, not just individuals, but holding that mirror up to our org and our chapters and everything. What role does allyship play in building the bigger we? And how can allies be more effective in their support? Taylor, let's start with you.
Yeah, allyship is important, y'all. Because just a little bit like in going back, right, in the spaces I grew up and inhabited, I needed allyship in order to make it through and survive, right? And I had that. I am very lucky that in those spaces I did. And in this work and organizing in particular, we're not in it just for a club, y'all. We're in it to build power. That's what we're doing. We're not just bringing people to the table. We're outside. You're bringing the hammer. I'm bringing the wood. You bring the glue, or if we need glue, or I don't know how to build a table, but we're going to build that table and we're going to build you a seat, and everyone at that table is going to have a seat. I love a good analogy, y'all. But that's what we're doing, right? And so it can't just be in silos, because we need people to utilize their privilege also, but we need to, as I've said before, we are not free until we're all free. And that means our most marginalized and our most vulnerable. So that goes to our trans folks, our folks with disabilities, our Black and brown people, immigrants, refugees, and then people hold multiple identities, y'all. So I'm talking about trans Black disabled women. I'm talking about trans women. I'm talking about Black trans men, immigrant, disabled folks, right? We all need folks, right? And then we also have, um, people who are just, in different classes. It, we all need each other, like in terms of like community, right? We all need to advocate for each other. And so allyship is not just about in terms of Black and white. It's about the issues we're advocating on. And when, things get rough or things that, who's standing beside me? And not even just standing beside me, who's standing in front of me, right? I've been on the front lines before many times as a Black woman. And I've met so many people, y'all, but I've also I've experienced what that can be like on those front lines. And I know that my experience through the justice system may be very different from Hannah. Love you, Hannah. Who has to go through the justice system? Who is standing in front of me, right? When things get rough, who's going to check on my family or do these things. And, it's all this stuff and being in community together. And that's comes with the relationship building. I can pinpoint Hannah out because that's my, that's my girl. Thank you. But, so I just think allyship's a big thing. And, Hannah, I think you said this earlier. Allyship is, it's not just a cute little label you get to throw on. It's committed work. As a cis het woman, it's committed work to be an ally to the LGBTQ community. And I recognize that and I hold that to really be, what does it mean to be an ally? It's not just showing up to Pride, right? It's being in the rooms. It's having those conversations, building those relationships, advocating, when things at the school board level get rough, who's showing up there, right? When we see all these policies come down, when we see the attacks on DEI, who's just having these conversations, right? So allyship is committed work. It's uncomfortable work sometimes. And we have to, again, I think something I hope people are taking away from this podcast is sit in uncomfortableness. Sit in it. And it's okay. Sometimes I have to do that too, to be an ally, to do this work too. But we are building power, and that's the whole thing. It's great to do, be in community with with one another, but we have intention behind that. And we're very clear about that. And so to build this table, to have a seat at this table, we need everyone. And for folks who really want to be there too, So I think I answered the question.
You answered the question. You answered the question in the most powerful way. Yeah, who's showing up? Who's committed to one another? Because we know that we're stronger together. Eliza, in your opinion, what role does allyship play in building this bigger we?
I mean, Taylor said it. 1 out of 10, no notes, Taylor. Exactly right. Everything. I mean, there's really, I just agree with everything she said. The only thing I would say is to give an answer is listen, right? Our allies listen. Listen to us. Listen to just listen to us. Don't come into the room and think that you know everything. Do you know how many times I've been told about myself, my situation, my, like Black people, what, and it's just like, what are, sometimes, people are not interested in listening, and that right there, I feel like is the number one thing that should be doing. Be quiet, sit down, listen. And so everything that Taylor said, nothing to add there.
100%. I'm like, yeah, I think even for me, sometimes I'm just like, come in, be quiet, sit down, observe, and maybe you'll learn something. Because I don't know, what's that saying? If you come in trying to just take up as much space, you're not going to learn anything. You're just going to be assuming things, and that's going to make an ass out of you and me. So let's not do that. And Taylor, you touched upon something earlier that I want to dig a little bit into: creating inclusive spaces. In your experiences, like, what are some key actions individuals and organizations like ours can take to create a welcoming environment for all, regardless of race or background? And let's we'll just dive in.
Yeah, I had an experience, like we have this really beautiful event at our chapter. It's called Troublemakers Cafe. And so we have making sure you're out in the community so people know your organization. And we were at this organizing event and got new folks, and they came to the TMC, our Troublemakers Cafe. And I would say many folks who identify as trans, LGBTQ came into this space, and we were connecting afterwards, and they were like, I wanted to make sure this was a safe space for me and my people, right? And so I think recognizing that, like, I was like, I'm not gonna sell you on nothing. Like, you have to, like, I was like, that makes total sense, right? Like, is this a space for me and my homegirls? If you can't go to Bella Noches, where can you go? um, so sorry, I use humor a lot, y'all. But that's the thing, right? We need to listen to folks. I think it comes down to that, as Eliza said, is like listening, and making sure that we are doing, we're transparent. We know who our base is. We know what our base looks like, and our base knows. They know that too. We have conversations. It's constant. These conversations can't just happen behind closed doors, or in staff meetings, right? They need to happen with the people who are doing the work beside you, your volunteers, your members, right? Because they're also talking to people, and who are they talking to? And so I think it's just in terms of like creating that space is being transparent and know that we're committed to the work. And I think also as organizers too, and when we meet folks who are like, is this a safe space for me and my people? Have that dialogue, because we're having the same questions, right? And then also what work, because people want to be involved, especially politically right now. And we have the privilege as the organization that we are to do that work. Like, and some organizations can't. And so to make sure that what issues are we talking about, right? Like when we are discussing, the issues or even our socials, my comms queens over here, they know who are we targeting? Like what's the messaging here? who is this in response to? And so I think it all really goes back to being intentional, right? And making sure it's not transactional. I think we really hit on that. So yeah.
Thank you, Taylor. Yeah, no. Intentionality. I'm sensing a theme throughout all of this conversation. It's just like, y'all just be intentional. It's not that hard. And for you, Eliza, in your experience, like, what are some key actions that people can take to like make sure we're creating an inclusive, like, safe environment for folks?
Yeah. One of the things that I'm really proud of, I'm proud of many things, being a part of Pennsylvania Stands Up, but is we have something we call community commitments, and we use this not only internally in our staff spaces, but also externally in meeting spaces for volunteers and members. And we just outline certain things that we agree to as a community meeting. That this is how we're setting the table for our conversation. This is how we're setting the table for our meeting. And I think that that was new to me when we started doing this. That wasn't something that I had ever experienced before. And so having community commitments where we name certain things, and we name, here's how we want to conduct ourselves in this space, is really, for me, I think it's just transformative, like as you run meetings and what they can be. And I think that does help create a welcoming environment for people. People kind of know what to expect, and they are able to show up as their authentic self for the most part, right? I also, so I think that's really important. I think we need to add some things to our community commitments, right? There are things that we have, but that are really good. It's a good start, but I think we could add some things that would even make it even more people to understand that this is a place for you. This is a place for you. You are wanted here, and your opinions, your voice is not just wanted, but needed in this space. So there's that. The other thing I would say is, of course, it just like literally went out of my mind. Give me a second. Oh yes, I remember. The other thing I would say is we have a lot of people that come out to our meetings who like to take up a lot of space and talk a lot, and and I think as organizers, just in general, and white, black, whatever, whoever you are, like, to be able to like make sure that we are inviting like putting people, like saying like, thank you so much for sharing. Now, let me ask this person who we haven't heard from. So kind of cultivating that space, and allowing everybody to feel like, oh, like I am wanted here and my opinion is wanted, and this is a space for me. So I think that that's something that we need to, that we do, and that we should continue to do.
I just want to jump in right now.
Okay.
That is a seasoned organizer right there. Like,
Yes.
yes, that is a seasoned organizer right there. Eliza, so much love for you. Okay, sorry, Edwin.
No, don't be sorry. I was like, I love it. And I'm like, yeah, 100%. Hell yeah. More of this, please. And Hannah, take us home for the last question.
This has been such an enriching conversation, and I can't thank y'all enough for being here. So the note I want to leave us on: what advice would you give young activists and organizers starting out in this space, in this political climate? What's your number one piece of advice? And let's start with Eliza.
Yeah, thanks, Taylor, for saying that before. I love you so much. I'm just thrilled that you are a staff person here at Pennsylvania Stands Up, and like an organizer. I just think the absolute world of you, and I'm just so glad you're here. So thank you. But advice for young organizers, like people who are entering, into movement spaces, is find a mentor. And and that applies to like all races, and whatever class that you identify as. Like, find somebody who's been doing this, who that you identify with, that would identify with like your experience, and like you can relate to each other, and ask them to be your mentor, ask them for, check-ins, regular check-ins and stuff like that, because that's so important. And I didn't have that originally, right? Like when I first started doing this work, I mean, I had mentors, but they weren't necessarily people that I necessarily could totally relate to. And it wasn't until later on that I found people outside of, this community, but, people like through People's Action and stuff that have been organizing a long time. And, were, it was a Black women, right, organizing a long time, that I could be like, hey, impart your wisdom on me. This is something that happened. How would you deal with this? Have you dealt with it? That kind of thing. And that is really the best piece of advice I think that I would give, because that's so, it's been, since I found like those mentors, it's been like transformational in like my own organizing. And yeah, just like how, like my knowledge base, and just how I deal with situations. So that's, I think, my biggest piece of advice.
I love that. Thank you so much, Eliza. Cannot emphasize enough how important mentorship is. Taylor, what's your biggest piece of advice for young organizers?
Yeah, always love when we give each other our flowers because I'm about to give them right back. So particularly my advice for young activists, young Black activists, and young Black organizers. I started this work when I was 17. Did a little bit of organizing, but really didn't fully understand what I was doing. But I knew I needed to do something, right? I felt called. Like it's when you end up in either in the streets or organizing your students, or people, and in the face of injustice, like that's a calling sometimes, to do that. And so mentorship is important. And I'm lucky enough that I got to end up working with mine, and I'm not going to try and cry. But like I was 17, very lost. I went through a lot when I was like still trying to figure out, because I had just really felt like what chosen community felt like. I grew up in the community that I was raised in since I was 6, but I got to choose my political home and my community, that I would be like linked arms with and stuff, right? And so you have to trust those people. And sometimes it can be really hard to navigate organizing in activist spaces at a young age. So find mentorship. So I'm very grateful for mine. And know that you don't need to know everything. It's a learning experience. I'm still learning. Imposter syndrome is real, but that's why we have mentorship, and we have to believe in ourselves and know why we're doing it. Continue to learn. I'm always trying to learn, whether that's trainings, whether that's readings, being in particular spaces, and also rest. Um, Rest is important. I think Edwin started us off with like rest is resistance. It really is. Our ancestors did a lot of work, through their bodies, right? And so like their biggest dream for us as we're doing and continuing to exist in this world is to rest, to take care of yourself, right? And not just put on a face mask, girly poo, like really be in community with someone, really listen to your body, and know that it's okay when you need to take a step back. There will always be work to do. As someone who felt very guilty that this is my calling, and I'm a Black person in this white space and I need to continue to fight, there are people that will do that. You have to trust your community, trust the people you're with, listen to yourself, and know that it's okay to take a step back. Burnout is real, so we need to like be proactive in taking care of ourselves, and know that you would be welcomed back with open arms, because I didn't think I would be, and I'm very grateful that I'm sitting here with all these beautiful people, someone I've known since I was like 17, right? I'm 25 now, and being able to have these conversations, do this work, and have the energy to do it. It's going to be a long couple years, right? And so just, give your flowers to yourself, fill up your cup, make sure you're giving your flowers, giving other folks their flowers too. And just, accept community, and rest is what, is my big takeaway. So thank you so much, Hannah and Edwin and Eliza. I love you all.
Can I say one thing that I thought of? And Taylor, 100% on the money as usual in that advice. And one thing I would say is, like, and you alluded to this, Taylor, is setting boundaries for yourself. That it is so easy in this work that we do to just be on 24/7 and, oh, I got to do this. And this person, texted me at 10 o'clock about this thing, 10 o'clock at night about this thing that's happening. No, that is how people burn out. That is how our health goes, like, we're not taking care of ourselves. Our health gets worse. So I am a firm believer, and Taylor can tell you, because I did supervise her for a while, was like, your health is number one. And because if you are not taking care of yourself physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, you can't do this work. So rest is important, like y'all been saying, and that starts with setting boundaries and saying, actually, I'm going to be done at 6 o'clock, and, whatever happens after that, I'll, get back to it tomorrow or whatever. And I understand, like, it's different in every situation, but that's so important, because I've seen really great organizers burn out because there was no boundary setting. And that's something I learned really early on. And Taylor, it's a pleasure to, like, watch you from the age of 17 when we met originally to now, and seeing this incredible organizer that you've become. You've learned so much. You have so much experience and knowledge for, somebody so young at, 25. Like, the things that you bring into this organization, like, are immeasurable. Like, the amount of experience and your life learnings. And I'm just so thrilled to have you and to see you progress as an organizer to where you are today. I'm just so proud of you. I don't know what else to say. Like, I'm so proud of you, and just really excited to see what you're going to do in the future.
You're trying to make me cry, Eliza.
Yep. No.
Oh my goodness. I was like, I'm sitting here getting misty-eyed too, and I was like, I'm going to blame it on the weather. It's cold and dreary and a little bit rainy. And I'm like, yeah, this is it. But that's all we have for y'all today, friends. That's the end of the podcast. I just want to send out a special thank you to Eliza and Taylor for being here with us today. And for those of y'all listening, if you enjoyed the show, please follow us and share with your friends, share it with your enemies, share it with everybody. Your great-grandmother, let her know too. And we'll be sure to be back next month. We're keeping this pod going. Last year, we got a little distracted because, things hit the ground quickly and we had to move, but it's all good. We're planning to be here and be square all year this year. So come back next month. We have something special cooking for y'all. Again, this is your host, Edwin. Don't forget, Pennsylvania is for all of us, and we'll see y'all in the streets. Take care.
This episode of News You Can Use was produced by PA Stands Up member Liz Levens, Director of Narrative Strategy Edwin Stubbs, and Digital Organizer Hannah Henrishon. If you have any questions or topic suggestions, please email us at comms@pastandsup.org. Thank you for listening.